it's Miss Checka. I am standing in front of a super fancy house. This house. This is called Blenheim Palace, and it is in fact a house. Even though it has a whole huge network of buildings and stables and outhouses, this is one family's house, and it has been one family's house for the last 300 years since it was built. To this day, this is the house of the Duke of Marlborough. Don't get the wrong impression. This is not typical for one family's house. This is not how people in England live. This is how you live if you are a really on the tippy top of the aristocracy and you have done something to impress the king, which is in fact what one of the early Dukes of Marlborough did. The interior of the house is fabulous, filled with paintings of the family over the centuries. Some of my favorites are by an American artist named John Singer Sargent, because he's one of my favorites. And in fact, I'm able to go inside because now in modern times, even though this belongs to one family, they open it up to the public. So anybody could come, buy a ticket, and take a tour around the house. I can't tell you the whole history of the house, but I wanted to tell you one because I thought it was kind of the juiciest, and you know I like scandal. So this family needs a whole lot of money to maintain the house, right? All of this costs money. You need servants, you need groundskeepers. There's a whole infrastructure. It's almost like if you were financially responsible for a small town, right? And at a certain point in the family's history, they started to, I don't want to say be down on their luck, because they're still wildly more wealthy than you and I can imagine, but they needed to marry into some money. So the Duke of Marlborough at that time, and that time would have been like around like the 1920s, 30s, he married a very fabulously wealthy American girl. He actually married one of the Vanderbilt daughters. Her name was Consuelo. Now, if you've never heard of the Vanderbilts, they are kind of, I don't want to say the word royalty, but at the height of their wealth, they were part of what the closest thing that we had to American royalty. Just one of the wealthiest families that the US has ever produced. They have their own huge mansion, which you can now buy a ticket and go see in Newport, Rhode Island. And this beautiful daughter. And you see her face everywhere in this house. She's in all of these paintings. Because the money to restore the house, that was all hers. She paid for a lot of this, and her family, the Vanderbilt money. And also she's the great grandmom and grandmom. You know, she's one of the ancestors of the current family. Only downside, so she comes, she brings a lot of money, her family in turn gets a title, but her husband already had multiple girlfriends and kind of a main girlfriend or a mistress before he married her. So their marriage was not that happy. Like, they had kids, but the whole time he had this steady long-term girlfriend on the side, Gladys. So eventually he and Consuelo, they divorce, right? Later he marries Gladys, and then you think like, oh, you know, thwarted love, now they can be together happily ever after. They had been together for many years, but as soon as they got married, their whole relationship just starts to crumble. So Gladys was beautiful. She was well known amongst artists and inspired all these artists to create this art, and kind of eccentric. But when they moved in together into this house, Blenheim Palace, her eccentricities kind of came to the fore, and also he seems to be kind of a difficult person to have lived with. She was a huge animal lover. She had all these dogs and different kinds of animals, but she would also bring the dogs inside and have them in crates. Like, imagine if you had a living room in there and you just had like crates of dogs, and she would let them go into the master bedroom. So there's like priceless artwork anyway. Anyway, that's not why they got divorced, but they did eventually get divorced. And this detail is really hard for me to understand, because I cannot emphasize how incredibly massive that house is. But they just decided that they could not share a house, so he kicked her out. And she like took out her camera and took a picture of the van with all of her animals and her suitcases driving away. She has the picture developed and puts it in her album, and basically captions with like, well, I guess that's over. So after she's booted out of Blenheim Palace, she spends the rest of her life, well, almost. She spends many decades afterwards in a little town not far from here, all by herself, very lonely, very eccentric, lots of dogs, lots of cats, and then at the very, very end of her life ends up in an asylum. So that is the story of Gladys and of Consuelo. The other reason that this house is significant, and this really should be its own video, a really, really important person for American history, for British history, for world history was born here, and that was Winston Churchill. So Winston Churchill, who led the UK during World War II, he was born here in this house. His dad was one of the younger sons, and they call it kind of minor branches of this family. So inside they also have like a small museum where you can see his letters from when he was a kid, his family connections. It's actually like very, very moving. But I don't want to say too much because honestly, Winston Churchill was such a great man that he deserves his own video. I hope that one day you will grow up and remember your old nice teacher, Miss Checka, and send me to live in a house like this one. Wave goodbye to Blenheim Palace, and I'll see you next time. Bye.